Welcome to a first introduction of Workflow Manager, a product of Moksa. With Workflow Manager you can automatically track, organize and manage workflows in Canto Cumulus, the interactions between files, records and users. Workflow Manager is completely integrated in Canto Cumulus and comes with a Cumulus catalog called Workflows. In this catalog you can build the workflows. These workflows here under templates can be reused, can be started from the web and can help you in your daily interaction of assets and users. To define such a workflow, all you do is go to the client and select the template that you want to edit or you want to check. A workflow has several workflow tasks. For instance, the first task of this workflow is a commission task. It offers the user the possibility to download the provided assets and create something new and upload that to the workflow. The next task in this workflow is an approval task, which is giving the users the possibility to verify, download the files provided and approve or reject them. So every workflow has a number of steps and even can have recursive steps that repeat themselves until something is completely approved. Every step of a workflow, every task, is part of a swim lane. So in a swim lane you can have one or multiple Cumulus users or roles that participate in this particular task, in this particular swim lane. These roles can be Cumulus users defined in your Cumulus client, or they can be even Active Directory users. A workflow, once you built it, can be used in sites. In sites you can start these workflows. So let's go to a live example. In sites a user can log in. Let's say Vince. And in the normal sites interface the user can gather, search for the assets that are already in Cumulus and that he wants to add to this workflow. Once he's finished with that part, he can click on the workflow portal if he is permitted to do so and he gets a list of the workflow templates that are available to him. Only the ones that are available to him. Could be that there are more types of workflows but that are not for his department or his job. So in this case we select the workflow, and once we've selected the workflow we get the ability to set the parameters before starting it. So I give it a name, I call it Flyer for Workflow Manager 2013, and I can set a start date. That means when should this workflow start? Could be now or it could be in the future. Input records. We can start a workflow without providing any files, and the first task could be a commission task where the files are asked for, or we could already add some files to this workflow from Cumulus, selecting them from the collection basket, or just by downloading them. In this example we're not going to download any files, upload any files. We're going to the next step. The next step is that for every swim lane and role in this workflow I am going to select a user. In this example I have design, sales and printer. We had 3 roles and 2 swim lanes. So for the sales I'm choosing Erwin. Now the printer was the second role of our workflow, and maybe we don't want this one participating. In swim lanes where there are multiple roles you can decide that some roles, sometimes for some workflows, do not participate. So in this example, I'm saying the printer is not part of this workflow. You can not only decide that certain roles are not participating in a workflow when starting it, you can even select certain tasks. If in the workflow template it was decided that some parts of the workflow are not mandatory, then you can list them and you will get a selection here to enable or disable them with a little comment of what the result would be. Could be that in some cases 3 departments need to approve, and in other cases only 2 departments need to approve a certain new design. So in that case you could, when starting the workflow, disable 1 or 2 workflow steps, so they are not necessary for this workflow. In a template you can also define a number of fields where the user can add some extra information, so they are specific to a template. So in this template I decided that I would have a job number, so this is job 125K, and as an information I could add the delivery date for this particular work flyer. I want it by the 13th of April. And finally we come to the instructions. We have to tell the user what the purpose is. This is a template, so the template can have multiple purposes, so we are going to tell the user what he has to do. So where we're saying please create a flyer for Workflow Manager. And of course I already have maybe previous information or instructions or a request form or texts that I can deliver that can be used to create this particular job. So here I'm giving him this banner which we created before, and I'm saying to him, please use same design as banner attached. This way the user who will have to perform this task gets all the information he needs, and I'm starting the workflow. Well, before starting I get an overview window that shows me everything that I selected, gives me a chance, an opportunity to verify, and then finally I could go back if I made a mistake. In this case I didn't, so I'm just clicking start. At this point the workflow now is ready for use. Behind the scenes, the workflow backend, which is a workflow scheduler, a Cumulus scheduler task, will perform every task in this workflow. And the first task is to notify the first person in this workflow that there is work to be done. So if I have a look in my mail, I could see if my mail already has arrived. And we see that Peter received an email, so let's have a look. And it says flyer for Workflow Manager 2013, create new design. The user gets an email with the information that I added, the instructions, and some additional information. Well, now this user, all he has to do is click on the link, and again he will nicely go into the Cumulus interface. There were no files provided in the workflow itself, only instruction files, so we can have the information here, the general explanation, and the more detailed information that was added, additional instructions. And of course I can have the banner. I can download it, view it, use it. So it's available throughout the whole workflow. Now Peter goes to work and creates a flyer. When he's finished, he clicks on this link and he uploads his work to the workflow. If this file already existed and it was a correction, you could have downloaded it and now checked it back in with a new version. He can add a comment, he can even add notes if he wants. If he made a mistake, he can delete this uploaded file. But he's finished, so he says submit, task submitted. Behind the scenes everything is checked if he only has to deliver one file. In this workflow it was defined that he only needed to upload one file, and he had a maximum of 5, so that's how you can control what the user has to do. And now this user is ready. During the whole process of this workflow, the administrator or any person who is allowed to use the workflow reporter can go and have a look at the status of the workflow. Of course, every administrator is also notified via email of what is happening in the workflow, but you can also have a very detailed look at this particular workflow. You could see the complete list, you can search for it based on status, on a lot of different parameters. You can go and have a look, but in this case we just want to see here what's happening with this workflow. I get the information of who's participating, what extra information there is, that there was an extra file delivered, what the instructions were, the start date, not yet ended, so no end date, so we can have a clear look on this workflow. We can see also the individual steps and where we are. So at this point we are at this step in the workflow because the first one was done. That means that I can have a look at what was done. There was nothing provided, but in the output records we received a file. I can even go inside and have a look if there were any comments, but let's keep it simple at this time. So this guy should have gotten an email. We will check in a minute. If you as an administrator want to be reminded of how this workflow was actually really working and what it was doing, you can even go in and have a look at the graphic representation of your workflow. So it gives you a clear idea of the different steps that you can expect in a nice graphic. The next person in this workflow was from sales, Erwin. He received an email that he has something to do. And yes, here's the example. Flyer for Workflow Manager. He gets the information he needs and he can click on the task. And it gets him right into the task. He has the additional information that was provided when creating this workflow. He gets the instructions that he has to perform on this particular task. And he gets the file. He can, one or more of course, it could be multiple files. In this case, he can use the normal Cumulus tools to download. He can get the preview. He could do preview annotations if he wanted, if this is enabled. Even if you have the vProof integration with the vProof stack, you could even do proofing and verify this file from inside vProof. I'm gonna keep it simple in this example. I downloaded the file, I saw the file, and I'm going to approve it. I'm just approving it, and I could give a comment or not. I said, good job. Save. So now this is saved, and behind the scenes it is already processed, and I can see, okay, Erwin approved, and I can submit this task. Once it is submitted, the backend will once again do its work, and the backend being, in this case, the scheduler. The scheduler behind the scenes is executing the Workflow Manager backend. The Workflow Manager is evaluating all the steps in the workflow and is going to the next task. The last task in this workflow was actually creating collections. Collections with rejected and collections with approved assets. And it will mail this to the person dedicated in that swim lane, which was, in my case, if we have a look, it was the designer, Peter. So Peter should receive an email telling him that his design for the flyer was approved. So let's have a quick look at that. The email for Peter. If we check his mail, there it is, and he gets a new mail with a pin collection basket where he can click on and see what happened, see the comments, and know that his work was approved. Also, Vince, who was the administrator for this task, gets notified throughout the task that a commission work is finished, the approval is finished, and finally that the design the workflow was finished. So all of these participants are communicating and getting informed via email. All the files and the information is stored in Cumulus. Quick and simple. To close this workflow, finally you can have a look here in the workflow manager and see that now the status is done. There is an end date and all the tasks are done. Sometimes customers, of course, come up with much more complex workflows. Here's an example of a customer who wanted a workflow with 6 different participants interacting and approving files. Well, sometimes it's complicated, but it doesn't mean if it's complicated that we can't do it. This workflow actually needed 1 baseline workflow and 4 template tasks. A template task is a task that can be called recursively until something is approved finally. If you want to see the graphic representation, this is the main workflow, and from this main workflow, these individual other steps, other template tasks are called and are in that way performing the steps of the workflow. So these are then the individual steps that are repeated until that part of the workflow is completely approved. This was a sneak preview of Workflow Manager. There's lots and lots of functionalities that I did not cover, but it should give you a first good idea of what the product can do. If you have any questions, just contact us. Thank you for joining.